guys, Bomi here with John Huber, the owner of Huber Concepts, and we are going to be taking a look at his triggers, a little bit on his brakes, and John wanted to take a look at not only your older design, the tried and true, but what you've done to make a little bit lighter trigger and take a little bit off the price in doing so.
Yes, it's been an interesting couple of years here. I've always been trying to produce the finest triggers for you, the shooter. I look at it more of a tool for your brain in this discipline versus just putting another widget on your gun to make it shoot better. What I find is more of the improvements are in the shooter, not necessarily in the gun. So we're here with Bomi. This is a normal gun review for him. This is where I try and say, hey, what are my philosophies about better proficiency in shooting? And it doesn't come down to the gun so much as it does come right back to for the operator. To do that, you have to know a few things about yourself. Number one, when you're pulling up on a trigger, you want best tactile sensation here. But as you can see, every time you pull up on a trigger, your flesh doesn't rebound the same way each and every time. Additionally, try moving your trigger 20 thousandths or less without exaggerating and know you moved your finger. The problem is that's where most people, that's their threshold of limitations. There are other differentials in pressures that you have to deal with. If I said, hey, there's a trigger that pulls 1 pound, 1 pound, 1 pound, that gives your finger a metric of what that much pressure is. Unfortunately, you can't achieve those kind of metrics in a standard single stage trigger. They usually break 30 to 40 thousandths, and any time between 0 and that break of the trigger, you lose perspective of position and pressure between 0 and that break moment. You don't have a good representation. Additionally, a lot of people use Lyman pull gauges or what I call fish scales. It's a subjective test. You're still hand holding a device that all it is a load cell and is giving you a pressure it's reading at the moment. So it's basing a lot of the pressure readings off of how you perceive the gauge in your hand. So it gives you a rudimentary number, but it doesn't give you anything that gives you proper sensory observations. Additionally, when it comes down to it, by the time you realize you moved your finger that 20 thousandths, your round should be on the target. Arguably, what I try and do is minimize lost time and distance in something that occurs in very few milliseconds. We're looking at 10 to the minus third seconds. 1001, turn that into 1,000 hertz buzz, 1 millisecond, buzz to fire. You get better perceptions of what you see in your eye. Now, your eyes receive this sight picture, sight alignment information on a continuing basis. It isn't framed out at 32 frames a second or a stroboscope effect. Your brain is receiving the information your eye receives on a continuing basis. Now, your brain has a certain brain speed that it operates on. Most people are there at one speed and they don't know how to accelerate their thinking process. Right now, your heartbeat might be 72 beats a minute. That equates to 880 milliseconds of time. Beat, rest, beat, rest, beat, fire. Okay? So you're expected to pick a moment at the rest of your heartbeat that's arguably half of your heartbeat rate at 880 milliseconds. No, the rest period's actually under a quarter of that time, under 200 milliseconds of time. So it's beat, rest, beat, rest. It's disproportionate to the time that you need to pick. So your resolution of your time scale needs to be changed here. Think faster than your environment, see with a calm eye. If you can process that information in the brain, it takes 8.5 milliseconds to send that signal to your finger to fire. Okay? All that time gets stacked up against you. So by the time you realize your reticle's on the target, pull the trigger, the gun goes off, the target travels to and impacts the target, usually occurring late on the target. So what I believe is, think faster than your environment. Covers a lot of ground in life today, right? If you're here, your heart beats at 72 beats a minute, but jump into a race car at 160 miles an hour, and you better be racing your brain speed to keep up with the changes in front of your environment. In other words, constant changes in those things. Now, those changes in your environment that you're looking for in your visual cues and putting all the factors together with the wind, the distance, the target movement, your movement, the world, everything's movement. So it's a very short amount of time that those coincidentals of your sight picture, sight alignment are actually synced up to say, hey, I'm on target, pull the trigger now, and lose time and distance. In the old days, a flintlock, you had to wait 4 seconds for the gun to go off and hold that aim until the gun discharged the round to the target, and then you got to look through all the smoke. That was all flintlocks, matchlocks, clocks, locks. It was timing devices. The problem is most people don't have a good sense of their rapid time. So what I do is I looked at this mathematically. So if you can tie the mathematics, now you put all the fine numbers in the design of your gun down to the thousandths and 10,000ths of an inch, costs you a lot of money. You want high resolution in your optics, costs a lot more money. We're not talking one-and-one-way accuracies. We're not talking quarter minute of angle accuracies. We're getting it to the point where these exponential changes in your accuracies occur down to the arc seconds of angles of accuracy. It all occurs here on the resolution scale relative to a time base. The mathematics ties this all together. So in order to produce something that times an event out that occurs in a couple of milliseconds when your normal time thinking is 1001. What happens when you don't shutter your camera fast enough? You blur a freeze frame race car. So what you have to do is you got to shutter the camera faster, think in faster increments, take that picture more quickly to freeze frame that rapid motion. What you're watching is the exponents of all this action in front of you. It's not so much the linear motions, but the changes that occur. This is where you develop the exponents. So what I do is I mathematically make a mechanism that stacks arcs, circles, and rotations, and that's how I build all the exponent changes. Now, how do you look at exponents in the math of you, the shooter, with all this information going through your head to time out an event that occurs real quick? You can time an engine to run at 8,000 RPM, but you can also time your music to sound good. Now, as a kid, I used to play a lot of musical instruments, but I was kind of tone deaf, so my music sounded like crap. But they always said, "Hey, Huber, you don't sound good, but you play drums. You play good timing." And everybody was happy, and our music sounded good in that context. So what I try and do is I use a Dvorak instrument that develops and gives you a visual track of these exponents in digital graphic manner. This is actually a differential equation, calculus-derived results of where we stack all those exponents in the design of the trigger. This is where it shows up. These are flat exponents, so your first stage is low exponent changes. But when you go to the wall, those exponents pitch up. If it's vertical, it's a wall. You're not going any farther. So you have to control the exponents. And that's what we do here, is control how the exponents play out under your finger. So we make it so that the trigger can actuate, accelerate through that moment of time in 10 to 13 thousandths But you don't feel it until you've moved your finger 20 thousandths. But then your round's on the target, on target. If you're arguably a millisecond late in your delivery on the trigger, your round is occurring late on the target. So this is where we can get the time up. Now, the width of this wall is extremely short. It's low, and in this case, this comes to the derivative, which is the f of x of a differential equation, at about a pound. So you pull up through the first stage, you get a metric of pressure and position of your finger on the trigger. Okay? So you can actually get this to pull up to the wall, and you could be right there and flutter this trigger. Additionally, there is a secondary function that when you abort your pull comes back at a lower weight that comes approximately 0.6 pounds directly back up the front side of the curve in time. So your wall moment is identical. And in this case, it's arguably about 15 thousandths or less in duration. This is where you minimize lost time and distances. By the time you get to the wall on a perfect marry-up, you should get a good image of what your finger should look like against that trigger. You got a metric of pressure and position right there. So watch the finger. Look at where your finger marries up when you're pulling it straight back on this trigger. There's your marry-up. That should be the same way, and it fully spreads all the force of the trigger against it. So there's no lost time and distance. Your flesh is set. It isn't going to crush anymore at that 1 pound measurement. So everything is measured up correctly. You have to control the mathematics. Through you first, through the rifle, through the rounds that you set up at a feet per second plus or minus variation, and you know exactly how long it takes for that bullet to fly to the target at any range. So what we're doing here is we're improving the accuracy of the shooter, not the gun. The gun's built in. All those things that gun was designed to do, the gun's going to do it. It's up to you to time the release of that gun to occur on range. Now, a couple of years ago, I came to realize it's all mathematical, 1.21 gigawatts. How did I know? This is what ties it all together between the operator to get the accuracies. A couple of years ago, I made a change-up. I used to make my bodies as a 4-part assembly sandwich. To improve that and try and keep my costs down and everything, I changed up my process. So what I did was, I single-pointed position to position, making 3 parts into one with a cover plate on it, okay? All the mathematics are still retained because all the internal structures are all still mathematically derived. What I did was come up with a better way to produce my bodies. Everything is just as rigid, just as bomb-proof as anything else that these have been into. If you go to see a video from American Precision Arms, how not to break in your rifle, you'd be surprised how durable your firearm really is when it's in a real stress situation. Okay? It's designed to work. The trigger is designed to shoot and be precision. So if you think you're going to be doing monkey drills or throwing it up and down a mountain, forget it. The trigger's designed for precision fires, not necessarily. I tell people, don't do bump drop tests. It's not a proper test of the trigger function. TRADOC requires a 1.5 meter drop to concrete on safe. What they are testing for is not whether the trigger is going to go off in that situation, but will it continue to function after that traumatic event? And yes, you can operate these triggers. They'll continue to function. We've tested them up to 100,000 shots. That means the trigger's going to outlive 10 or 20 barrels of barrels that you're going to have to change to burn that trigger out. It's going to outlast the rest of the gun, the barrel being the consumable part of the gun. The best advantage that I got out of changing my body process, that I was able to do it in a lighter aluminum material, but I was skeptical about using aluminum, but everybody else uses aluminum. I went ahead and had these Rockwell hardened to a 60 Rockwell, which is arguably as hard as the steel melanite surface. So I just produced a more economical, lightweight body. By the way, the weights of the triggers, the bomb-proof exponent is about 81 grams. For the same thing, it's about 45 grams. So there's a 40 or 50% weight reduction, as well as costs were brought down. So these are actually designed for the people that really, I'm not putting this into a 50 BMG gun and shooting hundreds of thousands of rounds. No, I go out hunting, I go through a couple of boxes of shells a year. I want the best control I can. And we're finding it's improving everybody's quality of proficiency in shooting exponentially. So what I did was, I thought I was smart. Hey, we'll entice the market a little bit. We'll knock some money off of it. It lasted a little too long, but I justified producing the differences in the body platforms to give a better application for more of the shooters that are out there and give them the quality of shooting they're looking for. Now, what backs this all up is I've got 5 patents under my name, and a lot of them relate to these devices here, which are more timing devices. These are traceable metrics and standards as derived from the mechanical function in ways that you aren't going to be able to qualify that trigger performance any other way but this. Lyman pull gauges don't give you the necessary information. Low on the chart here, you're going to see where it gives improved lock times, extremely low energies to move that trigger 10 or 15 thousandths is arguably down to the 3 place decimals of pressure over foot-pounds of energy, but it's actually down to 0.181 on this particular event, and it breaks at a 2.100 peak weight. And these are straight generations of the exponents. And this is exactly what we're seeing in your resolutions as you derive your shots. And it's better timing. And this gives us the ability to suit more people. I have 8 and 10-year-old kids that can impact the 1,000 yards and the mile. Give me a call. I'll show you. We were out in Price, Utah, Memorial Day weekend, and we had an 8-year-old girl. Had her with a bolt gun 223, had impacts on the 1,000-yard target. It was really fun. And then I had another vet buddy of mine show up with a 338. He had problems. He hit a grizzly bear a year or so before in a car. Folded the car, wrecked his eyes, and he had to change his entire pose for posture on the gun from right-handed to left-handed because his eyes were wiped out. He came back, he was struggling at 600 yards. We put a trigger in his gun, and by the end of the weekend, that man was back on the mile mark. It was just awesome to see, and we were bucking 14 to 20 mile an hour winds. Additionally, at that event, there was the International Milk Jug Shoot. There was only one guy that actually hit it at the mile. So trying to shoot a target that's this big at a mile range in higher gusty winds, that's an accomplishment. So these people that get out and enjoy the timing that is presented here, it's exponential. It just improves everything about your discipline and how you apply it to the firearms. That if it's like me, I got a passion for this stuff, and I want to give you as much of the information that helps your proficiency more than just putting a better widget on your gun. Okay, but this is what it takes to make the proper music maker, the choreography of your music, your camera shuttering. Think in a higher resolution, think in 1,000 hertz buzz coming into that moment, get a better perception of the speed and position of the reticle coming onto your target and when to release. And that's what it's all about. This year I saw 5 guys put a trigger in their gun and take their first match ever 5 times. Additionally, I'm seeing match results coming back where the top 5 or 10 guys are all wearing Huber triggers, and you can see the changes in the scores as they go down. And it's really interesting to see that there can be this much impact with just thinking about a time sense versus just a mechanical throwing a rock at a target. Now, granted, this is highly technical. It's abstract for the mind, but this is brain food on how to operate your devices better.
I'm actually shocked at how many people overlook the absolute starting point when they do any kind of a build or want to upgrade their rifle. My ability to shoot some of these rifles like this one here with your trigger in it is just a total game changer.
Ballistics is physics. Half of your mathematical equations are in time. Everybody tends to forget that last phrase, or we've been brainwashed or trained improperly on how to shoot a rifle. A lot of this discipline can be carried over to the quicker actions in like 3-gun or pistol shooting, because those time constraints get even tighter. You want to put out 10 rounds in 3.5 seconds over a span of a very short amount of distance and time. So this high-speed thinking actually improves all your disciplines if you can think quicker. And rehearsing this stuff in a time sense, your music sounds better. That being said, go out to the range and enjoy it. I'll guarantee you that if you believe the philosophy of see with a calm eye, think faster than your environment, you're going to notice all the little lost time and distances that you have with every rifle you pick up or every gun. You're going to notice where, oh, I'm losing time pulling on the trigger. When's it going to go off? When your aim is still moving all over. So it improves your whole discipline on how you apply all your physiologies, everything. I believe in lighter triggers. What we're finding out is our customers like what they coined the 12-12 trigger. It's 3/4 on the first stage, 3/4 of a pound on the wall. I look at it like this. You're breaking a 3/4 pound trigger, not from zero, with all the confidence of you knowing where your finger is, your attention's on the target. Bang. A lot of this stuff came out of being in armor. I was in tanks for a while. You were expected to get rounds down range on a 4-man crew in 5 seconds or less, and we were shooting out at targets 4,000 to 10,000 meters. The reality is they're extending the ranges right now. I've got guys taking 6.5 Creedmoor out past 2,600 yards. They're actually setting the new record at 5,300, 5,400 yards. That's 3 miles on a 3 or 4 foot target. That's arc seconds angles of accuracy that everything has to be perfect over those long distances. But if you can achieve those kind of accuracies, think what they're like later on. And it's my lovely wife Sandy calling in from Fond du Lac. We're in Duluth. She gets to listen in as we finish this video. So, thank you very much. I hope you could appreciate our technicalities to improve your proficiency. It happens here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Thank you, Eric.
No, thank you, John.
Happy shooting.
Thanks, guys. But check out all the links down below.